G'day there, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Daniel Anderson Experience. And today I am very lucky to have with me a man who only needs to go by one name, and that is Vesa, who is the Principal Program Manager at Microsoft. So welcome, Vesa.
Just sipping the coffee.
Gotcha.
Awesome timing. So yes, welcome. Thank you, Daniel. Well, nice to be here. Nice to have a chat with you as well. So really good.
And as luck would have it, and as time zones, late in the night here in Melbourne. But where can we find you?
Yeah, I'm based in Helsinki, so I'm located in a weird time zone related on our data center and my management chain being in Redmond. So I'm 10 hours ahead of time for them. So I can kind of tell and predict how well their day will be going because I've seen it already. So.
Now, mate, you're held in pretty high regard across the Microsoft community, and especially in the the developer circles. So, for the non-devs or the people that are listening that don't know you, and there's not going to be many, but tell me a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you come from, your role, and how you got started.
Yeah, so my name is Vesa. People always ask me how do I pronounce your name. To be honest, I don't care as long as you get my attention. So it's not a Vesa American Express. Everything
it's just one name, Vesa. Exactly. That's all you need.
That's fair. So I've been in Microsoft in October for 15 years. So I started as a consultant back in October 2006. And I landed a position as a SharePoint consultant in 2006, which is super exciting because SharePoint 2007 was just announced and it was going to GA and nobody had any clue what's going to happen with the SharePoint at the time. And then I worked as 8 years as a consultant first, started working with product group during those years as well. So I did some training, like the master certification training for SharePoint 2007, 2010, 2013, and really concentrated on the extensibility side. And then after that 8 years, being a principal consultant, working with some of the largest customers in the world, which was super fun. I got to know people like Jeff Deeper and a few others. So I came to be this person where any customer in Europe had let's say, a nasty issue within their SharePoint deployment, and then they call to Jeff Deeper. By the way, don't do that. That's not smart. But then he delegates that forward, and then I always got a call that, okay, Vesa, can you go and fix it? So my kind of a role in the last year of being a consultant was more I was the helper guy for product group dealing with the hard customers. So, and that was really nice experience because then you get to know interesting deployments. And at the time, we were kind of mainly still in on-premises, which completely changed, which is awesome. But it was really interesting to see those deployments, learn to deal with large customers and CEOs and CTOs and whatever. And then they offered me a position in the SharePoint CAT team, which did exist at the time. There's currently no customer advisory team in SharePoint. It was a different times. 7 years ago? 7 years ago. Yes, there was a Facebook reminder on the weekend on my farewell party from Microsoft Finland. And then in my case, I basically said that, well, I can take the position, sure, but I'm not going to move. So I basically, due to family reasons and just being, I don't know if it's I don't want to say any dirty words. Being family reasons and just didn't want to actually give it up and move to US. I basically demanded that, well, it's a good option, but I will stay in Finland. Which nowadays is more natural, but maybe like 7 years ago, it was pretty rare. At the customer advisory team, everybody else was there in Redmond. And then after a while, I got merged to the actual product group. So currently I'm reporting, well, Adam Harmets, who were in your show 2 weeks ago, is my skip manager. So, and it's been an interesting ride, let's put it this way. So working on the SharePoint, helping community is a big part of my work. So I'm in the product group, but still kind of actively external facing. So helping people to adapt the right ways of extending Microsoft 365, not just SharePoint, which is a big thing as well. So we're trying to get away from this kind of a mentality where every single product group and every single organization internally tells that use us, don't use those. Those are our competitors, use us. So let's rather talk about the overall overall platform. So even though I'm inside of the OneDrive and SharePoint organization, which is merged organization, we have a joint leader who is Jeff Deeper with the Microsoft Teams, and then there's a joint leaders for all of the other extensibility in Microsoft 365. So we're trying to tell the story. And one of my big roles is then helping there with open source community, samples, documentation, videos, and nowadays there's a lot of MVPs helping us on that journey as well. So.
Yeah, so you must have seen. I mean, starting out in SharePoint, like a lot of us did. There's been, I guess, quite a big change or shift in most cases from SharePoint to Teams and that type of thing. So I'm imagining you're doing a lot of work with the Teams team as well as SharePoint.
Yep. Yeah. So. Teams doesn't, for the platform, especially for the platform side, Teams doesn't really have a kind of an active adaption team or a community-facing team, and that's where I help a lot. So I work then together with Caruana Katimo among the other people. Caruana is really leading the non-developer side of the Teams and Microsoft 365 and driving that adaption. So among other things, she's owner of the adaption.microsoft.com and all of those assets. And then I help there on helping with the rise of the Teams, and then the role of the SharePoint and OneDrive and Azure and Microsoft Graph and all of that stuff in this bigger message. So trying to, rather than, the mindset is really that rather than, again, using the internal competition, let's forget about the internal organization. Let's try to tell the story around the bigger picture. What does it mean for the external audience, rather than confusing messaging, which we used to have quite a lot. So.
And so from a community point of view, are you finding that there's a bigger focus, like from a development side now? Are you seeing a more heavier focus on Teams development versus traditional SharePoint development?
It's kind of a mixed. So sure, there's a big push up from Microsoft, like we know, for driving adoption of Microsoft Teams. But then, as we have a recurrent meetings with a lot of the ISVs on a monthly basis or bi-monthly, like tens and tens of ISVs. And as we're having a discussion with them, it's pretty obvious that sure, there's a high demand for Microsoft Teams, but are people using Microsoft Teams extensibility option? That's a different question. So yes, we have a 250 million monthly active users of Microsoft Teams. We have, I can't remember what's the official publicly stated usage for SharePoint as an example, so I can't actually quote anything. But there's a lot of people using them. Now, are they doing extensibility on it? That's a separate discussion. Sure, the Microsoft Teams extensibility model is growing, and there's a lot of room for growth over there. And I think as we are merging things together, so we can clearly see that SharePoint is getting closer to the Teams and SharePoint is being surfaced in Teams, and then you can use the same extensibility of options as an example on SharePoint and in Teams. That helps on driving also the Teams adaption. But then, of course, Teams has its own extensibility options as well. So it's growing, but there's still a lot of room for improvement. There's a lot of customers clearly who don't quite understand that, hey, wait a minute, so I can actually surface my business critical data inside of this Microsoft Teams where my employees are anyway working on. They will be there 8 hours in a day. So pretty much chatting in the meetings and all of that stuff. So having the business data then surface directly in there rather than losing the context, moving into another application is really the promise of the Teams as well.
Yeah, and I think I had this discussion also with Mark Cashman a couple of episodes ago, and it goes to that point as well around the usage of Teams. A lot of people have had to dive into Teams with the current ways of work in the pandemic and all that sort of thing. Whereas traditionally, it might have been the first workload that people would have been accustomed to was obviously email. Migrate your email in, you're in Office 365, and that's the application that we're using. But now it seems that a lot of people's first interaction with 365 isn't SharePoint or isn't email. It's actually Teams. Yeah. So, it might just be for chats or group chats or meetings. But now, as you said, people are starting to realize, can we bring that line of business application in? Or there's some extensibility there that we can use. And I think, and you might have an opinion on this as well, but I think post or as we come out of this sort of pandemic, I think there's going to be a lot of interest or a lot of people thinking, well, what else can we do with
Exactly.
Microsoft Teams now?
Exactly. I think we're still in the, well, we are certainly in the between the pandemic situation and dealing with that. You're in lockdown right now, as an example. The numbers are rising. Hopefully they will start going down again pretty soon. But we're still in this kind of chaos mode. Everybody's trying to figure out how to kind of still, after 1.5 years, how to work remotely, how to deal with the family, how to deal with the schools, all of that stuff, how to balance the life, because it's getting complicated. So we need to get away, we need to get, let's say, life more standard and more safer, so we can start thinking more on, okay, so now that we dealt with this, everybody's working remotely, at least, let's say, half of the time, everybody's in Teams. Okay, so how can we now start improving the teams? The last year's situation gave a pretty shock for every single company in the world. So nobody had any time to do budgeting. Nobody had any time to react on the thriving adoption of Teams as a platform, as an example. It was just, okay, so we need to move to the Teams, period, adapt it. And all of the IT investments, pretty much my personal opinion and assumptions, I don't know for a fact, but a lot of the IT money went basically on driving change management, on moving the business day-to-day work from the office space to the remote base. And we're still in between of that adaptation because, hey, we're still struggling. After maybe a year or maybe a half a year, or after the, well, hopefully the vaccinations rates are going higher and we can get back to work, and then the situation stables, and then we can start thinking, okay, so now that we've done this investment, how do we maximize this investment? So it's not just about, can we deal with this? It's more about how do we improve that.
And do you think that when we talk about that sort of shift, I guess we're talking more about Teams-based applications and things like that. Where's the maturity at with Microsoft Teams-based applications? Are we still seeing the real infancy of this?
At least from my perspective, the let's say the technical readiness in a platform is in a really, really good level. Sure, we still need to do adjustments here and there to make sure that meeting applications works both in the web client and also in a desktop client and all of that stuff. So sure, there's certain adjustments here and there, but the state of capabilities is already awesome. I would say that we certainly, the set of capabilities what we can build is not really the limiting factor. It's more about how do we educate the business decision makers and technical decision makers on the art of possible. So obviously, if I'm the person who got the money and the resources, and I can assign them to work on things, that person needs to be educated, not the developers. It's not that the developers actually make decisions on, are we building something in here? No, it's the technical decision makers in ISV or partner scenario and business decision makers who had the budget. So we need to educate them on the art of possible for their business objectives. And that's where the demand is coming from. And I think we're heading there, but we've been more focused on the developer messaging, which, by the way, I have to say, which is quite traditional in Microsoft as well. So we used to always have MSDN and TechNet. So are you a developer or are you an IT pro or IT administrator? But we never actually had this central or a mid-ground, which is basically for, okay, you're a business decision maker. So let me explain you the art of possible and how we can improve your processes with our applications. And that's, as an example, something with the adaption.microsoft.com service and the website is trying to target much more efficiently. So rather than here's an API, let's focus on, okay, cool, there's an API, but what would that enable for your scenario to do?
And what part of the Teams, I'll call them Teams apps or Teams development, what area do you think there's a lot of future in? Is it around Teams apps, or is it the meeting extensions, or what area really is looking for you the future of that side of development? That's
interesting question. So obviously, high level, we would be able to divide this maybe in 4 main sections, or maybe 5, which is the chat-based applications, which is the bots and the message extensions and link unfurlings. Is the chat really the killer application? I'm not sure. At some point, we were heavily pushing on the bots, and bots framework is in a really good level, and they work. But is that really for the normal end user the kind of way of engaging? I'm not sure. Maybe the tab and the channel tabs and the personal application, or more efficiently there, maybe the personal application, so you can access your business data directly from the left navigation, because that's quite often what you need. You need to jump to the business data. You need to have information about whatever usage details or sales or whatever, and then move back on the discussion or find that. Now, should we have that information also available in a meeting? Absolutely. So that inside of the meeting, when we ever need to talk about or do active planning, we can just track that information directly in a meeting and just have a discussion out of it, making it super easy then to be exposed. The Fluid framework as a meeting application. So maybe something, well, that's kind of a traditional thing. The meeting application, if you think about the promise of the future of the meeting application, there's a lot of promises there, because with the Fluid framework and other options, we could potentially really truly create interactive meetings. So rather than just having this kind of a video feed, we can truly do something together in a meeting, and that's potentially the direction.
Yeah, that fluid framework is going to provide a lot of a lot of capabilities there. And for those listening and watching, can you just give us a little bit of I guess high level overview of what the fluid framework is?
So oversimplifying thing, I'm trying to simplify this in a way that it would actually make sense. So of course in Google Docs or in SharePoint Online or in Teams, you can at the same time you can draw or write a document, and that you can basically see at the same time what the person is writing on the document or drawing in the PowerPoint. That's kind of cool. Fluid framework is then enabling that kind of capabilities and options to any extensibility, so any application. So then you can design an application, let's say a Kanban board, where you put the drag and drop the cards. That would be probably the easiest way to explain that. But you can actually see live on real time as a person moves the card from in planning to tasks or an ongoing task or done task, and you can see it in your screen at the same time. So you're kind of collaborating in the application on real time across the world, and that's really the promise of the Fluid framework. Now, have we yet seen it really super actively in action? No, we haven't. It's still in preview here and there, and maybe we should do a better job on Microsoft providing reusable samples and kind of fulfilling the promise of real-time collaboration inside of the application, inside of the Microsoft Teams meeting. Something which is also being looked on closely internally, maybe I think it's pretty obvious, is what does the SharePoint Spaces means in the context of Microsoft Teams meetings? Hey, could that be a way of integrating and doing 3D worlds and all of that stuff? What if we would combine that to the Microsoft Mesh? What if we would take these things and put them in a meeting, and then we collaborate together and use the Fluid framework as technology to discuss or build stuff? I don't know. There's a lot of kind of technologies available, but I think we're still not quite there where it's reality. So we're heading there, and we're seeing the promise. But that's also something with what we as a Microsoft, which I personally have been promoting for many years, which is we need to actually show and build the real samples and the show the art of possible. It's not about selling. It's not about the slides, which are making good-looking promises, because in the end, the developer still needs to write the code for it, and then make it available for end users in an easy way.
Yeah, SharePoint Spaces. You mentioned SharePoint Spaces. There was a lot of big things promoted about SharePoint Spaces. Have you seen? I haven't seen a lot of it in production or that type of thing. Are you seeing the adoption of SharePoint Spaces in any way?
I don't think we have any public numbers as such. We're using internally that in certain cases and building kind of a 3D experiences. And sure, So personally, I would say that we should have done a much bigger, let's say, push on, hey, now it's available. These are the things what you can build. Here's an example. Here's maybe a template which you can apply to your tenant. Maybe we should use the lookbook.microsoft.com to provide you example scenarios how you can actually use the SharePoint Spaces, because technically that service would support that. But it's again matter of where do we prioritize our resources and what kind of things we actually do. Now there's interesting development happening there, because it's not it's not a forsaken or forgotten technology. So combining that maybe between Microsoft Mesh and whatever we showed in Build, which are all kind of promises of the future. But there's an interesting scenarios potentially available, because the reality is that we will not get away from this remote way of working within 6 months or within a year or 2 years. This is here to stay.
It is here to stay, that's for sure. Now, the partner ecosystem, you obviously do a lot with that ecosystem. Tell me a little bit about that and the work you do there, and I guess how do people get involved in that program?
Sure. So we started our open source and community side on the extensibility and partner ecosystem back in 2014. When github.com/Microsoft organization didn't even exist, unless I'm completely mistaken. So we basically started sharing learnings and samples, and something which has grown to be much bigger than it was. But it really started as a grassroots effort initiative where, hey, we are building stuff for the customers. Why wouldn't we share this with everybody else? And at the time, it was around how do you do extensibility in SharePoint Online using add-in model, which is obviously all outdated, soon to be deprecated, and all of that stuff, because it's way old. But it's that mentality of building stuff and showing with real-world samples, not necessarily super polished samples, but rather a samples on, okay, so this is possible, this is how you do X and Y and Z, this is how you do ABC, have a look on this code, has really helped on a lot of the partners on then making their products. And that's been growing, and I think we're now up to like 700 samples in the open source and in the GitHub. And then we have community calls. Right now, I think we have 14 community calls in a month. We started with once a month, then multiple ones, and all of that stuff. So it's all kind of an expanding. It started with a more on a SharePoint patterns and practices. Now it's across the Microsoft 365 as well. So it's really explaining the art of possible with community calls, with the demos, where the partners can share their learnings, not really sell their products, but explain what they learned about building the products and sharing technical nuances, samples being demoed, explaining technologies, and product group people like me or somebody else and PMs explaining what's coming, what's the latest, so that people are up to date. And the easiest way to understand and how to get started is AKMS/M365PMP. That's our official community page, where you can actually find all of the links to documentation, samples, assets, community calls, all of that stuff. So
cool. And you got to give me a little bit of a scoop here, as much as you can anyway. But what's coming down the pipeline that you are first of all allowed to share, or that is exciting for you that you think is going to be, well, not be a game changer, but something's going to bring a lot of value?
For customers and partners, I think the biggest thing for me, at least this fiscal, well, there's two sides of the story. If I think about the larger Microsoft 365, there's the Microsoft Viva seems to be a huge interest across the customers, and there's a big push on that. And for me, as a classic, let's say, with a SharePoint background, a lot of us has a SharePoint background, even though we do other stuff nowadays. It's nice to see how we're getting merged in a more consistent messaging around the Microsoft Teams and the SharePoint and the OneDrive. So there's more clarity on the message. So it's not anymore like, hey, are we going to do this or that? No. Let's do them both. So merging the best of the both worlds truly together as for example, the Microsoft Viva connections is a really good example of that, with Teams and SharePoint and OneDrive getting in an understandable format. And there's a lot of, let's say, stuff in the roadmap of making that better and better. Viva Topics, awesome example. There's a lot of stuff in the the Viva topics and the document management side, which are getting much better. There's a lot of investment in that side of the Adam Harmet's organization as well. So really getting back on document management, automation, the best of what we used to have in the document management. Well, not that we actually took it away, but we haven't really been investing on auto-tagging, automatic things. We haven't been really on the fine-tuning and polishing the document management side. And there's a lot of focus on that as well in the context of Viva. Then, of course, there's the Viva Insights and Viva Learnings, which are owned by different organizations internally, but externally they're part of the same Viva stack, and those seems to be really interesting as well. Now,
have you had much involvement with Viva Connections?
Yes. So I'm, as part of my role, if I took my community hat off, then I'm a PM in the SharePoint Framework organization, and then SharePoint Framework is the underlying technology for Viva Connections as well. So closely involved in that planning as well. So
and the dashboard is obviously on the roadmap to be released very shortly. I'm assuming that's some exciting areas there too.
We're certainly heading towards first public review relatively soon. I think it's fair to say that we're talking about now weeks when we're heading to the public preview with the Viva Connections dashboard, and that's when you can actually have those adaptive card components exposed in the mobile or in the SharePoint pages as well. Until that's now released, it's kind of a disconnected still. I think a lot of the partners and customers are still kind of struggling to understand what is it. It's just exposing the SharePoint inside of the Teams. Okay, so that's already a good start. But what's the next step? And what's the next step? And then next after that. So there's a lot of interesting scenarios coming to make that experience even better in the future.
So what value, if we talk about the dashboard there, what value is that bringing to, let's just say, a normal user? What can they expect from that?
Yeah, so I would say that and that's something which we, of course, need to optimize as a story experience as well. But getting all of the employees in the company to easily access the most relevant information what they have on any device in a super fast and snappy way is really the key. And that's what the mobile experience, targeted mobile experiences is all about. So you don't have to go anymore to the portal, for example, for corporate communications. So that mobile transforms to be almost like your personal corporate portal, which is customized based on your profile, customized based on your profile attributes, and then you see the most relevant business information. If you're a CEO, you obviously have a separate set of attributes and visibility on that mobile view than if you are a first-line worker who doesn't have a desktop, so you only have a mobile. And that's basically one of the key objectives of the Viva Connections for sure is reaching to a new audience. So there's a lot of people who are not necessarily sitting 8 hours in a day on the face-to-face in the desktop. There's a lot of us, sure, but then there's a lot of people who actually do other stuff. So for those people also getting connected to the corporate communications, getting connected to the business data, getting connected to all of the services what the company is providing, I think that's where the thinking is coming from. And then the same dashboard is getting also exposed inside of the desktop view. So of course, you can get the same information from there as well.
And so do you see the lines blurring there a bit? So traditionally, again, SharePoint, we had a company portal, company intranet, which, I mean, it probably isn't going away for the foreseeable future. But, now there's a shift to surface that type of information inside of Teams.
Yeah.
Do you still see the need for both of these? I mean, we talk about, I talk a lot about, I guess, frictionless access. So being able to have a similar experience for those that want to use the browser and use SharePoint, or a similar experience inside of Teams for those that are using Teams. Do you still see that?
Yes. Now, if you think about the Viva Connections, the desktop experience, especially the inside of Microsoft Teams versus the SharePoint, it's exactly what we're telling for every single other partner to do. We're basically telling, put your application inside of the Microsoft Teams so that the user doesn't need to leave from the context where the user is working. It makes perfect sense. We've been piloting that internally in Microsoft now for 6 months, and it's working really well. I can access the portal and natively in the Teams by clicking a button, and the experience is getting better and better. Now, do we want to expose that also in the browser? Yeah, absolutely. Why not? I think I would rather say it in a way that the same application should be adapting to mobile, to browser, to Teams, to desktop, whatever, and then it's up to the end user to choose
to decide
how to access the information, rather than us as a Microsoft forcing customers to a certain direction, or the managers of a customer forcing their employees to a certain behavior. That typically has a counter reaction. Every single time you say you should be doing X and Y and Z, and there's like, yeah, but why? I don't want to. I don't want to say what you tell me. I want to make my own decisions and find the ways of the working which are natural for me. And that's basically what also the Viva connection is providing. Or the SharePoint is providing. You can access the SharePoint information using a mobile. You can access browser inside of the Teams, whatever is natural for you. And the good thing about, obviously, if you think about the Viva connections, there's no Viva connection desktop as it is currently. There's no license costs. There's no additional things. It's more a selection of access points where you can get to the information.
Yeah, it's kind of OrganizationX is providing a service or an experience, but that experience, the user can decide how they consume that experience. As well. Yeah,
and of course, sure, there are currently certain limitations here and there, and all of that stuff. Everything is getting worked on. So for a much more seamless integration. Kind of related on that one, just a classic, because this always comes up. But well, if you're improving that within the next 2 months, why isn't it already working like that? Which is, well, it's a natural decision as we are in the cloud. We don't want to wait 2 years to come up with something and ship something and then cross the fingers and hope that it was matching what the customers are hoping for. So we want to actually trickle down an additional capabilities. And then the customers are basically saying, is this a good thing or is it a bad thing? And then we react on that. If we think about the classic, let's say SharePoint 2016, no, SharePoint 2013, I don't know if you remember, but it had the search-driven WCM sites for .com sites.
Yep.
Massive big push. We invested millions and millions of money on it, and then we basically went and said, this is how you should be doing performance website, and then nobody cared. And so was that a wise decision for the money? Certainly not. So what we're trying to do now more is basically trickle additional things, and then we react on the feedback, and then we adjust the designs based on that, rather than trying to be hey, Microsoft knows all, people in Redmond make decisions on behalf of us. That doesn't work. We need to be meeting partners, meeting customers, taking the feedback, adjusting our designs. And that's why the work what I do, for example, with partners is super critical, because we're basically then bypassing the information to the Redmond and then trying to teach the partners. And then maybe if the partner says, well, that doesn't make any sense. And then we go back in Redmond people and say, well, they said it doesn't make any sense. Maybe we should be having a discussion. So,
yeah. Yeah, very, very interesting. Now, I know you're a busy man, so before we wrap up, did you call? Well, I'm going to give it to you anyway. But did you coin the phrase "sharing is caring"?
Yeah, I guess I did. Yes. So
you did.
yes. So that was
also
yeah.
No, go.
No. It was basically so. That's the mentality which we started promoting the PMP back in 2013, 2014. It came to be just the phrase on the community because, hey, we want to help everybody. And people kept on asking, for example, for me, that why are you giving away your slides? I was at some point, we were sharing hundreds and hundreds of design slides and samples. Why are you giving away? It's your hard work. No. If I give it away, somebody else can actually then build something on top of them and they will give it back, hopefully. And if they don't, hey, it's okay. But somebody will give back. And then we are so much smarter as we build stuff together than competing against each other. So that's where.
And I think that's why you're held in such high regard across the community, because of the amount of stuff that you do share. So it's it's a very good mantra, I guess, that you've coined there. Now I can't let you go without, because a little birdie has told me, I'm not going to name who the person is, but they will comment, I'm sure, when they listen to this episode. But I need to ask you about the etiquette that you have when you deliver sessions in conferences and where you don't wear shoes.
Yeah, that is correct. Now, funny story related on that.
Please explain.
So I'll explain the story in a second, but just background story. So back in Copenhagen, 2018, I think it was the SharePoint conference in Copenhagen. Was it 2018? 2019, I can't remember. So Jeff Deeper had first his keynote with our VPs and Omar and Adam demonstrating stuff. And then I was hosting the developer keynote right after. And it was kind of a stressful situation. Jeff Deeper moves back on the audience, and then I come on the stage and start talking. And I come to the stage without shoes and walking to the stage, and all of a sudden I realize that my shoes and my socks are completely wet. And I'm like, did I pee on myself? What? And Jeff Deeper on the front row and all of that stuff. And of course, I didn't react on that too much, but started then talking and explaining hands. But just before explaining hands, that was interesting. Now, just before the Jeff Deeper's, when he started, the initial start of the conference was a drummer band, which basically had really cool drumming effects and lighting effects, and they had water. So it basically sprinkled throughout the whole stage, and it was completely wet. So, and if you're wearing shoes, not a problem. I was wearing socks. So anyway, where that's coming from. So back in when we still had the Microsoft Certified Master certification for SharePoint, 2007, 2013, and 2016, that was a three-week training in Redmond. Cost a lot of money for people to attend, and I was one of the instructors there. And one of the things what we saw as during that week is that people are getting tired. So how do you get the energy back in the room? How do you get the people to listen you? How do you do stuff? So, and in there, when I kind of got to use this model where I took my shoes off, so I can do crazy stuff. I can jump on a table. I can go stamp on the podium. I can all of a sudden jump on other people's table who's in the audience and just continue talking. But that demanded that I'm without the shoes. So it came to be the natural way of presenting when I'm almost like in home. We don't wear shoes in Scandinavia or in Finland, so when you're at home. So it came to be just a natural thing. It makes me feel more free, so I can do whatever I want on the stage.
I actually heard a term on the weekend where it was. I was listening to some commentary of an Australian rules football game, and there was a guy that was that walked out onto the ground, and he had no shoes on, but they used the term earthing.
Yeah.
So he's connecting to the earth or something like that anyway.
Yeah. Fair point. It's not precisely that for me. It's more like a freedom because the shoes are restricting. When I'm without the shoes, it's free. So
now, I instantly thought of you because I heard this story, last week, and then I heard this on the weekend. So anyway, very good. All right. We're going to wrap things up there. So, Vesa, thank you very much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to jump on and have a chat. And I hope we can get the chance to chat again and maybe chat more about the Viva story and things that are happening there. So,
absolutely.
thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks for having me.